Hello, and welcome to another edition of History with Mr. Mink. Today, we're going to be learning about George Washington's life from the Revolutionary War to his life post-presidency. Here we go! So in my first video on George Washington, we learned lots of facts about his early life, such as his wooden teeth, and that time as a child he received a hatchet and cut down his father's favorite cherry tree.
That ain't true!
You seem really aggressive right now.
That's not true!
Well, yeah, it's for a joke, so...
So get your facts straight.
Actually, we did get our facts straight. You can check the link in the description below to my first George Washington video to learn the truth. So American colonists were fed up with the British. Google taxation without representation. And they wanted to be free and to be their own independent country. For clarity, a colony can be defined as a country that is under the control of another country. In the US's case, they were controlled by the British. Knowing the kind of leadership Washington showed early on in his military career, colonists turned to him to lead their army. George also had the advantage of understanding British military strategy from his years during the French and Indian War. Still, Washington is not considered a great strategic battlefield general, but he was a great leader and kept the spirit of his troops up and motivated them to keep fighting.
You gotta keep on keeping on.
A perfect example of this is the winter of 1777 at Valley Forge. With food running low, disease running rampant, and hundreds of men dying throughout their time there, Washington held them together, and they actually came out in high spirits with this newly found confidence.
Let's do this.
They were outnumbered and outtrained compared to the British, but one thing they did have was a secret weapon that Washington himself helped create, the Dodge Challenger. The British had no answer for this technology, and with Washington leading them, the colonists drove straight through the British Royal Army.
Just kidding.
What he did help create, though, was a spy network. It is said Washington was more involved in intelligence operations than any future general until World War II. These were the first spies in American history, and they risked their lives for the opportunity of forging a new nation. The spies' stories are incredible, and honestly, there's too much information to pack into this video. It should be noted, however, the agents were not just middle-aged white men. Female and African-American agents were crucial pieces of Washington's spy ring. Maybe I should do a video about revolutionary spies. Washington was present for 17 battles during the Revolutionary War, including the Siege of Yorktown in 1781, which basically ended the war. Want to take a guess who fired the first cannon shot? You guessed it, General George Washington. They would not have been able to accomplish this and win the war, however, if it were not for a former enemy turned ally, the French. Once again, you can check out my previous Washington video to see why the French called him an assassin. The French's military assistance, both Army and Navy, was crucial for victory. Washington throughout the war actually tried to avoid as many battles as possible and seemed to have the mentality of just surviving the British and hoping they'd make mistakes. Some historians will argue that Washington didn't so much beat them as simply outlast them. The British at the end of the war simply did not want to keep paying for it, and were almost to a point where they couldn't keep paying for it. Fun fact, George Washington was America's first mule breeder. No, seriously. Mules are a crossbreed of a horse and a donkey. Until the invention of the tractor, mules were the most popular farm animals used behind the plow. Washington heard farms in Spain were using these animals, and eventually got one as a gift from the King of Spain. He was so impressed, he began breeding them on his farm. George not only shaped the US as a whole, but the US's agriculture greatly benefited from Washington's mules. After the Revolutionary War, George Washington was a national hero. I mean, when you lead a nation to freedom, that's to be expected. He actually wanted to be done with leading and wanted to return home to be a farmer, but his impressive leadership in drafting the Constitution added up to a ton of public pressure that he gave into. And after the first election in 1789, he was sworn in as the first president of the United States of America. Being that there was no previous examples of what a US president should do, Washington was careful in his actions, as he knew future presidents would look to him and his administration as a guide. He tried to be fair and present himself with integrity. He tried to stay neutral in foreign issues, and his presidency was full of firsts.
Duh, Tyler. It was all a first.
He created the presidential cabinet and their roles. He signed the first copyright law, which was actually a landmark event for writers, and nominated the first Supreme Court justice. The first national bank was established, 5 new states joined the Union, and numerous treaties with other countries were signed. He did do at least one thing that a president today would never do, though. In 1794, as acting president, he personally led a 13,000-soldier militia to put a stop to the Whiskey Rebellion, which resulted from farmers being upset about alcohol being taxed. It was effective, as the rebels dispersed before he and the military arrived. He served 2 terms as president and declined a third. He did not want the new nation to turn into another monarchy. George Washington laid the foundation for how our presidents, past and future, conduct the office of president. That is arguably the most important part of his legacy as president. There was no handbook on what to do. He made the handbook. His face has appeared on the dollar since 1869 and on the quarter since 1932. What's the difference between a duck and George Washington? One has a bill on his face, and the other has his face on a bill. The capital of the United States is named after him, although he never actually lived in Washington, D.C. For most of the time he was president, he either lived in New York City or Philadelphia. He is the only president not to live in the White House, as it wasn't completed yet. He did commission for the National Capitol to be built there, though. His homestead, Mount Vernon, is considered a National Historic Landmark and can be visited still today. George Washington never had any biological kids, but he did have 2 stepchildren from his wife Martha's previous marriage that he cared for as his own. He is a true American hero and passed away in 1799 at the age of 67. It's safe to say that the country as we know it today would not be the same if it was not for George Washington. That's the end of this video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want more history videos. In the description I have links to previous videos I've made, as well as a link to my Twitter. Thanks for watching.